Maybe you've seen messages about it on Nextdoor, or on Facebook, or heard from a friend. Maybe it's happened to you. People are stealing catalytic converters at unprecedented rates from vehicles across Portland. And for many residents, the property crime goes beyond mere inconvenience. I'm Andrew Thien, and this is Beat Check with You Oregonian. Up next, breaking news reporter Savannah Edens. Savannah went deep looking into the incredible rise of this very specific crime in Portland. We talked about catalytic converters, what they do, why people are stealing them, and what lawmakers are trying to do about it. Here's our conversation. Savannah Edens, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me, Andrew.
So, Savannah, you have so many stories and issues that cross your desk as our early breaking news reporter. There's so many different things you can focus on. Why did you want to go deep into the interesting world of catalytic converter theft?
I spend a lot of time covering the more serious issues around, more serious crimes like gun violence. And I spend a lot of time at homicide scenes. And while that is objectively one of the most serious crime issues that Portland is seeing, I noticed that it's a much smaller community of people who are actually directly affected by gun violence, and that issues like property crime, property theft, and just general detriments to quality of life, like catalytic converter theft, is basically affecting everyone on a broader scale. And so it was one of these things where I was like, it's either happened to you or you have many stories of knowing people that this has happened to. And we were just, hearing sort of different anecdotal reports about this being an issue. And actually a woman was shot and killed last year while allegedly acting as a lookout for someone who was stealing a catalytic converter. Like a homeowner came out and was defending his property, so to speak, and it ended up in a death. And so we saw that, there's like these really serious circumstances, but that for the most part, it's just this, I was hearing and hearing from people about it being just such a, like I said, a detriment to the quality of life in the city. And it's sort of this thing that was happening all the time, and leading to that question of like, why is it, I wanted to know, why is this happening? And why is it sort of so normalized? Yeah. There seemed to be a big atmosphere of kind of just, city officials or the police sort of shrugging and putting their hands in the air and saying like, there's nothing we can really do about it. And so that's the long answer for why I wanted to dig into it.
So I think for a lot of people, they might not even really know what a catalytic converter is. So you can describe what is this? Is this on all cars? And why is it valuable?
Yeah, I didn't know what it was either. So the catalytic converter is a part of the exhaust system. It's like similar to a muffler. And it's been sort of a regulatory thing since like in the 1970s was when it was passed by like the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States. And it was required for catalytic converters to be placed on all vehicles, except for some diesel vehicles. And nowadays, like fully electric vehicles don't have catalytic converters. So there's precious metals on the inside of the catalytic converter, typically rhodium, palladium, and platinum. And they act as a filtration system, and they filter the gases that a car uses, and it's supposed to be better for the environment. So they filter out like harmful gases. And that's why it's required. Those
metals are precious, and people are stealing catalytic converters to get to those metals. Is that the rub? So the precious metals on the inside, they're non-renewable resources. So they have to be mined from the earth, and we're not going to have them forever. And so there's a huge recycling industry around extracting and sending those metals to the refinery. The reason that they're in such high demand, particularly in the past 2 years, is because those metals are worth a lot of money, and they're worth more than gold. Like, for example, the market price for platinum palladium this year is about $1,000 to $2,500 per ounce. Rhodium is trading at $18,000 an ounce. Wow. Compared to about 2 years ago when it was trading at about $3,000 an ounce. In comparison, right now, gold
is trading for about $2,000. So each of these converters only has like a few grams of these precious metals. So it takes quite a bit, but there's just this huge black market for it. And especially in the past 2 years, there's been an extreme spike nationwide. It's not just in Portland. It's not just in Oregon. It's everywhere. Insurance companies are dealing out millions of dollars in claims because it's happening a lot. And there's different, attributable things for it. Obviously, the past 2 years have been an extremely difficult economic time. And so it's sort of, I think, become a crime of opportunity is my understanding from my reporting, but there's just a really big market for it.
So Savannah, this is kind of a sprawling issue, hard to wrap your mind around. How do people get money out of these catalytic converters once they steal them? They're not calling rhodium dealers, right, to sell this material?
No, and there's a little bit still of a shroud kind of around what the black market looks like, because part of what I learned is that we still don't really know a lot about how it happens. But basically, we know that thieves are, they can steal a catalytic converter in just a few minutes. Usually it happens at night. Most of the people I talked to told me about, hearing that loud scraping sound of a saw. And, before they even go out to their car, it's too late. But it also happens in broad daylight, often in like public parking lots, hospitals. The airport has been a big target, and Toyota Priuses, for example, are the biggest target because they actually have more of the rhodium, palladium, and platinum that we were talking about because they're a hybrid car. So anyways, they happen all over, in driveways, in front of homes, in parking lots. So what happens is people who are doing this typically use like social media, like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and OfferUp. And you can go on there right now and you can see, and you can put in, looking for a catalytic converter or looking to sell a catalytic converter. And they usually, arrange some sort of meeting in a public or even like a sort of obscure area. And either someone who's buying or selling, will say, selling catalytic converters, whatever. And then a buyer will say, I'll give you this much for it. And they meet up, and there's no questions. No, they're not asking questions about where it came from. And they're usually, these deals are usually happening with about like $100 to $300 a pop in cash. And so from there, that buyer, the intermediary buyer, sells the converters to either sort of unscrupulous scrap metal recyclers, who are operating under the table, or who are kind of known to be doing the illegal activity of also purchasing them without asking questions about where they came from. Or, processors that launder the metals is what authorities have told me. They also are shipping them or taking them to other states that are maybe more lax, for example, to our east, Idaho, and to our north and south, Washington and California, though those states are also cracking down on this issue. There are a few refineries in the country that deal specifically in those precious metals that we've been talking about. And I've heard word, but wasn't able to directly verify that some of these markets might be so big that they are going directly to the refinery. But this is where we get into the weeds with it, because you have to extract those little catalysts from inside the catalytic converter, those metals. And so that's usually where the recycler, which is like a recycling business, they have the equipment and the facilities to do that. So it does, I'm not sure like how it would go directly to the refinery in that case, but there's also word that they could be shipping them overseas as well to extract and get the metals and the money out of it.
But in terms of your understanding from a real on the ground level of the actual theft itself, those people who are committing the thefts, who are, getting out those saws and the Lloyd Center parking lot, they're pocketing maybe a couple $100 from this enterprise. They're not getting the $2,000 for the, X amount of platinum, right?
Down the line, it's like any crime ring. It's like any black market. You have the people doing the footwork, and clearly there are intermediaries. There are people who are running this as an enterprise and as an operation, and, they're passing it along, and there is a lot of money in the end of it.
Well, let's get into the regulatory stuff, trying to crack this in a little bit. But before we do that, you really, in your story, which we'll share in the episode notes, kind of did a big survey of shops that are, dealing with this. Can you kind of talk about what is the scope of this crime from, the number of auto dealerships and shops you talk to? Like, can you give a sense of it?
Yeah, I turned to car dealerships and muffler shops to get a better sense of the data because, unfortunately, the purveyor of the best data on this would be the Portland Police Bureau, and they have such a backlog of their public records requests that it would take months for them to extrapolate specifically catalytic converter thefts. Yeah. They track the theft of car parts, and they told me that the theft of car parts in Portland has jumped 270% in the past 5 years. And they, and we graph this out, and there are significant spikes, especially in 2020 and 2021. And so anecdotally, we know that a majority of those are catalytic converters, but car parts can also include I guess rims are a big theft, seats. People steal whole seats out of cars. But that category, for example, doesn't include license plates, which is another big theft item. But so it's not included in that. So we know that there's been this huge spike, but I couldn't really, I needed to find other ways to track down how much is this happening. So I talked to a lot of muffler shops, and one in particular in Southwest Portland, he's installing 15 to 25 new converters a week just from people who have had them stolen. And it's doubled his business, but he feels sad about that because it's such an issue. And in one case, he even told me that he installed a converter for free for a family whose van had been hit. And so, for the people without comprehensive car insurance, or people who are gig economy workers, or people who are, disabled or in, just a lower socioeconomic status, this is extremely detrimental to their life. It can cost $1,000 to $2,000 to replace this. And I don't know about you, but that I don't have that money. So it's it's hard even for working folks, middle class, or, working class folks.
Is it the type of thing where your car is inoperable, or just legally you're going to be in a bad spot?
Well, it's extremely loud. So it's it's like not having a muffler on your car. Right. And that's how people can always tell when it's happened, because they turn it on and it's a huge, horrible rattling sound. And they do have to get it back in. Let's
stay with the people, the victims here. Do any stories spring to mind? Because you chronicled quite a few in your piece of people who've had this happen.
I mean, for some people, if you have an older car, lots of folks who have older cars that are already maybe nearing the end of their life, or they didn't have comprehensive insurance on it, because why would you on a 2000 Honda, Mm-hmm. And so I talked to one guy who's I just don't even know what to do with it. He's just letting it sit there because he can't afford to fix it. So now he has to take the bus for 2 hours a day to get to work there and back. I've talked with people who witnessed
the act,
a theft in progress, and don't say anything, because you just don't know when a situation like that is going to escalate and whether it's safe to approach those people. I've talked with people who've had it happen to them multiple times, particularly those Toyotas, I gotta be honest. I mean, the main sort of anecdote that I used in the story was about a couple who, they were getting ready to put a down payment on their first house. And, they're in their 40s. They've lived in Portland their whole life. They know that what it's like to be here. And they felt like they had finally just sort of gotten settled and been able to settle down. And now they, go to sleep every night worried about this happening again and feeling a little bit hopeless.
And you extrapolate that out. There's, when there's one shop that you surveyed out of, about a dozen doing 15 to 25 a week, and that's just the people who can afford to have it fixed. You think of how many other people out there are going through the same thing right now.
Totally.
Well, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk more with Savannah Edens, a breaking news reporter at the Oregonian and Oregon Live. So, Savannah, your story chronicled, it was timely, obviously, because there's legal action. Obviously, this is a pervasive issue. And ideally, when something is so problematic, you cited the 270% increase over the last 5 years. Hopefully, lawmakers are taking note of this. Can you describe what happened down in Salem in terms of policy changes? Like, what are they trying to get at, and what are the chances that this helps solve the issue?
Yeah. Last year, Senate Bill 803 was introduced, and it garnered a ton of support from everyone across the state. Because again, it's not just Portland, it's everywhere. I mean, school buses, transportation authorities have been hit. Some of the legislators who sponsored the bill have had their own catalytic converters stolen. Not that politicians are any different from the rest of us, but I mean, it's just an issue. They're just, it's just an issue that really has affected everyone. And so the idea from people who have been directly working on this, like, actually a prosecutor here in Multnomah County, Kevin Demmer, he's been working with metal theft issues for years. And he, got to a point where he's like, we can't keep prosecuting this. We have to find a more preventative approach. You can't prosecute your way out of this, essentially. So he worked on writing the bill, and which passed and went into effect in January. And so part of the story was also about, trying to really break down what difference it makes and where they're trying to target this illegal chain of commerce. And so that's obviously a huge detriment to also the metal recycling industry, the people who are running business legally and recycling these metals that we otherwise would run out of, because they're non-renewable resources and they need to be mined from the earth. Kevin Demmer said, we can't keep arresting and convicting our way out of this problem, because it already was pretty hard to arrest and convict. Someone has to be caught doing it multiple times and caught in the act and then connected to other multiple crimes. And there's no one in the local police authorities who is directly investigating car theft or car part theft, but we can get back to that later. So basically, the new law limits the sale of catalytic converters to commercial licensed metal recyclers only. So those businesses have the equipment to extract the precious metals inside before sending them on to a refinery. They also recycle the steel shells, and they get to be used again. So it's like a good thing. Yeah. And so, but now the difference is that those recyclers, and a lot of them, for example, up on like Columbia Boulevard, up in our sort of industrial parts of the city, before the law, they would take like a photocopy of someone's ID, and then they would send them a check. So sending a check for the like purchasing of metal has already been in place for several years, and it was designed to deter theft, because back in the day, it was like beer kegs and like aluminum, like stands from high school, like football stadiums and stuff like that. And so they stopped using cash, because the idea being people who are doing illegal activity want cash. They don't want a check being mailed to them, and traceable. So that was already in place. But now if I go to a metal recycling facility in North Portland and I want to sell the catalytic converter off of my own car, for whatever reason, the recycler has to record the make, the year, the VIN number, and the license plate of the car associated with that catalytic converter. I also have to prove that I own it. I have to prove that I own the car and that it's from that car. And so the idea, being, they're just trying to create a more traceable system for, identifying where catalytic converters are coming from.
Is there a sense that will capture, the people who are cutting them off of cars and selling them on Facebook to someone they meet in the garage, or is that, that maybe is going to be a harder bridge to cross?
Not really. So it's a little too soon to tell. The hope from people in the legitimate, like legal recycling industry is that they've created a process with a trail of documentation. So there's something like, if something illegal is happening, the facilities that are doing it the right way, they can flag that to law enforcement, who is supposed to be following up on reports of this. I think the frustration in the metal recycling industry, from what I understand, is that they feel like there's this narrative that like thieves are coming to their recycling plant with a cartload full of catalytic converters, but they're not, is what I'm hearing, and that there's a totally almost separate black market going on.
Yeah, your story chronicled, you talked about the prosecutor, Kevin Demmer. He successfully prosecuted a gentleman named Tony Schneider Sr. who raked in more than $1 million, you reported, by selling catalytic converters to legitimate recyclers before cars were crushed.
Yeah, that was a huge racketeering case a few years ago. Yeah, I mean, that's an example of a business that was doing it, and a huge investigation that went into busting them for crushing stolen cars. But on top of that, they were taking the things that were valuable out of the car, like the converter, and selling them. But that's not really what's going on now, from my understanding.
Right. And obviously they wouldn't be providing the VIN numbers and the make and models to the legitimate operators under this new system. Mm-hmm. All right. So this is just such a weird web of of issues. Let's go back to the police really quick. I mean, obviously police have their hands full on a number of fronts, as you've reported, and our colleagues, about the staffing shortages and the traffic fatalities you've reported on and the homicides you've reported on. So where does catalytic converter theft rank on there? We care about this issue list.
I can't speak for the Portland Police Bureau on what they care about. I think everyone, is rightfully kind of fed up and sort of distraught over some of these issues in Portland, but it certainly doesn't rank high on a list of things that they can or will investigate. So if I had my catalytic converter stolen, knock on wood, I need to report that to the Portland Police Bureau, but nothing really happens after that. They do not have someone on staff. They do not have a detective investigating even car theft. So if I got my entire car stolen, which also huge problem, you're actually almost, according to like some of the data, more likely to have your entire car stolen than just your catalytic converter. So as much as catalytic converter theft is an issue, people are taking the whole thing. So anyway, so you should report it at the very least so that it can be compiled in data. But, they more than likely won't come out. They come out to like car dealerships sometimes who have experienced this, but they basically say there's nothing we can really do. The next side of it is that the Multnomah County or the sheriff's office for each county in the whole state is now supposed to be sort of a clearinghouse for the business side of it. So if a recycling company pulls up a red flag of, this individual has come in and tried to sell us like 4 converters this week, and it can't prove where they came from, things like that. They report that to the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, for example. But otherwise, I wrote that it sort of appears to be a relatively porous system of checks and balances, because after that, the sheriff's office tells me that they track these reports and that some, deputies connect similar cases and try to identify locations. But one of the questions that my sources brought up in the industry is like, why can't they just set up a sting? Why can't they go online, try to, list, I have catalytic converters for sale, and bust someone who's buying them, those intermediary buyers. And, and I posed that question and it wasn't really answered by, authorities. The DMV is also supposed to, follow up on reports of businesses who are, doing things illegally, but it's not really clear.
So kind of given everything we just talked about, Savannah, and kind of the broader context of all the, big issues we're facing as a metro area and as a region, I don't know. What's your big takeaway on this reporting? Like, why does this matter?
I think I keep coming back to that quality of life component. And, it's easy to look at all the issues in Portland and put something like this at the bottom of the list, understandably. We have like a lot of other crises going on. So But I think the way that it impacts so many, it's more than an inconvenience, and especially because we know it's an issue. People in power know that it's an issue. I think there's a genuine, concern from agencies and authorities to want to fix this, but people in the community feel like there's sort of a shoulder shrug of, oh, well, nothing we can really do. And then there are people who are trying to make a change and want to regulate the industry, regulate the black market. And they're just doing the best that they can, I think, to try to do that. But it's a complicated issue that's not going to be solved overnight. I just thought it would be a great opportunity because we see different, stories from local news, including us, about this increase in catalytic converter theft. But what does that really mean? And what does the process look like? And why is it an issue? And so that's what I had hoped to explain.
Yeah, you took it from, the random Nextdoor postings and news articles, right, where people were posting about their catalytic converters and really kind of went deep in a really compelling way. So thanks for your reporting and thanks for taking time to talk about it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Beat Check with You Oregonian. I shared a link to Savannah's story in the episode notes. If you like this show, give us a 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcasts. It really helps others find the show. And tell a friend. Help spread the word. The best way to support our journalism is through a subscription to Oregon Live. You can do that at OregonLive.com/pod support. Until next time.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
If you want to talk about sports, you also better be ready to talk about politics, culture, and business. I'm LZ Granderson, formerly of ESPN, now with the Los Angeles Times.
And I'm Will Leach, currently a contributing editor with New York Magazine.
We host The Long Game with LZ and Leach, a weekly podcast where we break down the biggest stories in sports and how they impact every facet of our lives.
Did the media drop the ball on Brittany Griner?
It took us 3 weeks to realize she was missing, so yeah, I'd say we failed.
Who's done more damage, Jerry Jones or Dan Snyder?
Can we just call it a tie and leave it at that? Is it possible to be an ethical sports fan?
Not when Deshaun Watson's guaranteed $230 million. We are all dirty, LZ. That's The Long Game with LZ and Leach.
Dropping every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts.
Please tell me Cleveland isn't winning the Super Bowl.
Acast
recommends.